Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new Hanazono Distance album, Hachi. Hanazono Distance is a three-piece instrumental rock band, I guess, though their lead instruments are piano and bass and drums rather than guitar, bass, and drums. And this is, I believe, their second release. However, this is my first time listening to them. I came across Hanazono Distance mainly through just following other bands on Twitter and having them throw up posters for shows on Twitter that showed that they were playing with other bands, one of which was Hanazono Distance. And I never actually took the time to listen to any of Hanazono Distance's music, though I meant to. But I saw that they were coming out with a new album, and I had literally no idea what to expect or what they would sound like, so I kind of picked it up on a whim and figured I'd give it a listen, and it's fairly solid. Hanazono Distance incorporates some elements of math rock and jazz into a kind of rough indie rock, post-punk skeleton, and make these songs that are mostly instrumental and just explore long stints of kind of repetitive groove and looping melodies that kind of just slowly build and evolve over the course of the song, though their songs are kept pretty succinct, at most of them being under 4 minutes. The first track on the album is called Charibu, and it starts off with one of the heaviest and noisiest moments on the whole album, with these kind of melodica from hell squealing over top of this like almost blast beat-esque percussion and some fairly noisy bass guitar going on in the background. The song rather quickly calms down, however, as we enter this section with this kind of looping, very pretty, somewhat classical sounding piano melody, and this polyrhythmic arpeggio being played on a synthesizer, and just some very atmospheric drums and some odd little, somewhat comedic noisemakers going on in the background as well. And the song just kind of builds on this for a while, with letting some of the piano melody loop and playing some more other kind of counter melodies on top of it, and just building it generally until eventually they reach a peak and drop back into the same kind of noisy, blast beat filled part that started the song off. It's a very strange track for sure, and when I first listened to it I had no idea what to think really. On one hand, I thought that the kind of softer piano-led part was a bit sterile and lacking in texture, especially with how kind of clean the sampled or synthesized piano that they're using is. But then they also really embrace a kind of noisy and rough texture on the kind of bookend parts of the song. And I was, and still am, very unsure about what to think of this song as an intro to this album. On the second track, Vanilla, Hanazono Distance embraces that softer, cleaner side even more, with this very clean, kind of bubbly synth tone, and once again some very sterile sounding pianos. However, the drums do sound really great on here, and really are the only interesting part of this song. This is definitely one of the weaker tracks for me on the album, as not only am I a little underwhelmed by the texture, but also songwriting-wise, I find that it doesn't really take me anywhere. It doesn't really have a discernible like high point and low point. It just kind of drives on this groove that evolves a little bit, but I don't find the evolution of it particularly entertaining. However, from that low point moving forward, the album is pretty consistently solid up until the end. I really like the next track, Janai, which has this kind of cutesy, video game-esque lead melody that I think is played on a synth of some sort. And it has this rolled, marching snare drum with this kind of strange bass synthesizer that goes with it. And the song is very much kind of video game-esque and is kind of cutesy, but it also, towards the middle of the track, gets kind of noisy with this whining, echoey synthesizer that comes over the melody, and they start to add on a lot of echo, and it gets fairly dense before dropping back into that kind of softer, cutesier march at the beginning of the track. And the kind of A-B-A song structure that showed up on Charibu shows up here again, with kind of ending where they started. We hear a bit more of that math rock influence on track 4, Kuniyaman, which features this chorus melody that is jittery and kind of unpredictable with its rhythms and kind of hard to parse on a first listen. We also get the first appearance of any vocals on this track, though only for a short period on the first chorus. And the verses and bridge are just really solid grooves with some nice melody work that hold this song together. It's a very solid track. I also really like the jazzy vibe and very tight groove that we get on track 6, Furugi. Also, the bass and drums just sound really great on this track, have a really fat tone. The drums sound great on the whole album, really, but this is one of the first tracks where we get a really just solid, tight groove between the bass guitar and drums. And this second half of the album is really a bit more bass guitar focused, where there was a lot more synthesizers at the beginning. And as a result, I think I like these later songs a bit more. And the track after that, Kabi, is one of my favorite tracks as well. It just has a really great groove to it. It's just really solid, and it comes off a bit more like a jam, even though it does have some clearly written parts, especially when we get these stabs of this kind of darker melody that jump in and kind of juxtapose themselves against the music that surrounds them. And the last track, Okyo, is really solid as well. It incorporates a little bit of maybe like condensed post-rock elements, as the song just builds and builds and builds on this kind of driving groove between the bass guitar, drums, and piano. But we also get some very pretty harmonized vocal ahs that give the song a bit of a grander feel than a lot of the fairly minimalist tracks on this album. The piano is also very blissful and pretty on here. They put some kind of reverb and echo on it to make it use up a bit more of that space, so that the kind of texturelessness of it is a little less of a problem. And while it doesn't reach like a big post-rock climax or anything, it does have a very satisfying ending and is a solid track. So overall, this is a kind of strange instrumental rock record, mostly led by piano and a backing rhythm section, that, I don't know, it's kind of just intriguing. There are some moments on here where I really wish there was guitar or like just something to add a bit more of a rougher texture to this. But at the same time, there are also these moments that really use the piano very well and sound really great. The production on this thing is really solid throughout. It's kind of a bit rough around the edges, a bit lo-fi, but still very clear. Everything's punchy and nice sounding in the mix, very pleasant to listen to in the headphones, but still has a bit of a rawer texture to it. Hanazono Distance is definitely an interesting kind of experimental rock band, and I definitely think that if you're into kind of weird, oddball rock, this is worth a listen. But it's not something that I'm going to be coming back to a ton this year and just be really obsessing over. But, it's solid. I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on this album. And if you're looking for just a little bit of kind of weird, oddball, artsy rock, and you're a fan of piano, definitely give this thing a listen. There's some interesting stuff going on here for sure. And that's me. This is the new Hanazono Distance album. It's called Hachi. And I'll see you guys next week for another review. Peace.